CEO. He caught his black maid's daughter solving $1 billion problem in seconds. What he did next shocked the entire company. The Technova conference room was deathly silent as dozens of engineers stared at the screen in disbelief. The system that had cost over $1 billion and 3 years off development had been completely frozen for 48 hours, causing monumental losses with every passing minute. "Does anyone have any idea how to fix this?" roared James Mitchell, the company's CEO, pounding the glass table. "We have Phoebus professionals in Silicon Valley here, and no one can figure out what's going on." In the corner of the room, almost invisible among the empty chairs, was 22-year-old Kesha Washington. She was the daughter of Dolores, that cleaning lady who had been cleaning those offices for 15 years. Kesha wasn't there because her mother had asked her to deliver some forgotten documents, but she ended up witnessing the most intense emergency meeting in the company's history. As executives accused each other and senior engineers stammered through confusing technical explanations, Kesha discreetly watched it. Sequence of code on the screen. Her eyes moved quickly, analyzing each line with a precision that no one around her could imagine. In a matter of seconds, she identified the problem. A seemingly insignificant syntax error that was causing an infinite loop in the security system. "Excuse me," Kesha said softly, raising her hand timidly. The entire room turned to her as if a ghost had spoken. Victoria Sterling, director of technology and known for her arrogance, narrowed her eyes in disdain. "Excuse me, but who are you?" "This meeting is for authorized personnel only," Victoria said, her tone heavy with barrel-like consoled contempt. "I'm Kesha. My mom works here, and I just came to drop off some papers." But Kesha hesitated, feeling the weight of all the incredulous stares on her. "I think I know what the problem is with the code." A wave of low laughter and whispered comments rippled through the room. The CFO, Robert Hayes, rolled his eyes dramatically. "Young lady, this is not a joke. We're talking about a system that costs more than the GDP of some countries. We don't need guesswork from someone who doesn't understand or gram." Kesha stood her ground despite the cutting words. There was something in her gaze, a strange serenity, as if she had faced worse humiliation and developed an invisible armor against it. "I understand that it seems impossible," she replied calmly, "but the error is in line 347 of the authentication module. There's a comma where there should be a semicolon." The silence that followed was deafening. Mitchell frowned and approached the screen. The engineers began furiously checking the code on the line she had mentioned. "My God," muttered lead developer David Chun. "She's right. How did she see that?" Within 2 minutes of Kesha's suggested correction, the system was back up and running smoothly. $1 billion saved by a 30-second observation, made by someone everyone asked him didn't know how to turn on a computer. The CEO watched Kesha with an unreadable expression while Victoria Sterling and Robert Hayes exchanged uncomparable glances, clearly annoyed at being outdone by someone they considered inferior. But while everyone was processing what had happened, no one enticed the small smile that quickly crossed Kesha's face. A smile that suggested this wasn't the first time she had surprised people who underestimated her. There was something about her calmness, her precision, her quiet confidence that didn't fit the role of cleaning lady's daughter Thate Virion had assumed for her. If you're enjoying this story of overcoming adversity and prejudice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happened in the next few days would reveal that Kesha Washington had secrets that would completely transform the dynamics of that arrogant company. In the days following the incident, the atmosphere at Technova changed dramatically. The news that a young black woman, the daughter of a cleaning lady, had solved a problem that had paralyzed the company for 2 days in a matter of seconds spread through the hallways like wildfire. But instead of admiration, what Kesha found was something much more sinister. Victoria Sterling called an emergency meeting with her direct subordinates the next morning. Sitting in her Italian leather chair with her Stanford and MIT degrees framing the wall behind her, Victoria couldn't hide the venom in her voice. You actually believe that a girl with no training, no experience, no relevant credentials simply saw a mistake that your team of PhDs couldn't identify? Victoria tapped her manicured fingers on the table. She obviously had privileged access to the code beforehand, probably through her mother, who has unrestricted access to the offices after hours. Robert Hayes, who had been present at the faithful meeting, nodded vigorously. Exactly what I thought. It's impossible for someone with her background to have that kind of technical knowledge. It must have been luck or inside information. What they didn't know was that Kesha Washington wasn't just a cleaning lady's daughter. At 16, she had been accepted with a full scholarship to MIT's computer science program, but was forced to turn it down when her mother, Dolores, was diagnosed with cancer. Medical bills and the need to care for her mother caused Kesha to put her academic dreams on hold indefinitely for the past 6 years. While working part-time at various jobs to support her family, Kesha had continued to study programming on her own. In the quiet early mornings after her mother had fallen asleep, she devoured online courses, participated in programming forums under pseudonyms, and solved complex code problems she found on platforms like GitHub and Stack Overflow. Her online reputation, a squash dev, was respected by programmers throughout the world. But no one at Technova had any idea of this connection. 3 days after the incident, Kesha was invited to Victoria's office. The room was deliberately intimidating with its panoramic view of the city and furniture that cost more than most people earn it in a year. Kesha writes. Victoria smiled with false warmth. I need to clear up a few things about what happened in the meeting. I understand that you were excited to help, but we can't allow unauthorized employees to have access to confidential company information. Kesha remained calm, her hands relaxed in her lap. I didn't have access to any confidential information, Miss Sterling. I simply observed the code that was displayed on the screen during the meeting. Oh, so you're saying you were able to identify a complex error in a billion-dollar system just by observing it? Victoria's voice was dripping with sarcasm. How interesting. And where exactly did you develop this extraordinary expertise? Studying, Kesha replied simply. Victoria lied, a high-pitched, unpleasant sound. Studying where? Do you have a degree we don't know about? Some professional programming experience you forget to mention. Kesha felt the familiar burn of humiliation rising in her chest, but her expression remained unchanged. It was the same feeling she had experienced at 16 when a private school counselor had suggested she might want to consider more practical courses open. Discovering her social background. I don't have a college degree, Kesha admitted calmly. But that doesn't invalidate what I've observed. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes flashing with calculated cruelty. Kesha, dear, let me be clear. This company invests millions in hiring the best talent in the world. We don't need well-meaning guesswork from people who don't have a background to understand the complexity of our systems. Robert Hayes, who had remained silent until then, decided to join the attack. What Victoria is trying to say is that we appreciate your initiative, but there is a hierarchy for important reasons. People like you simply don't have the necessary training to contribute on a technical level. People like me, Kesha repeated, her voice still calm, but something different shining in her eyes. Well, Robert hesitated, realizing he had stepped on dangerous ground. People without formal technical training, of course. Kesha nodded slowly, as if recessing the information, but internally every word was being carefully filed away in her memory. She had learned through years of subtle and not-so-subtle prejudice to recognize when she was being underestimated. And she had learned something even more valuable, how to use that underestimation to her advantage. "You understand perfectly," Kesha said, rising from her chair. "Thank you for clarifying the company's position." As she headed for the door, Victoria couldn't resist one last jab. "Oh, and Kesha, it would be best if you didn't mention this incident to other employees. We don't want to create unrealistic expectations about future opportunities." Kesha paused at the door, turned, and smiled. It was a small, almost imperceptible smile, but there was something about it that made Victoria feel inexplicably uncomfortable. "Of course, Miss Sterling. I understand that some people prefer to keep certain things private." After Kesha left, Victoria and Robert exchanged satisfied glances, convinced that they had put the girl in her place. They didn't realize that they had just made a crucial mistake, completely underestimating someone who had spent years being underestimated and, had developed very specific strategies for dealing with that kind of arrogance. That night, while helping her mother with her medication, Kesha reflected on the conversation. Dolores, noticing her daughter's thoughtful expressions, held her hand. "Something wrong at work, sweetheart," Kesha smiled, kissing her mother's forehead. "Nothing. I can't handle, Mom. Some people just need to learn that. Intelligence doesn't come with a degree, and that underestimating someone can be a very costly mistake." As Dolores fell asleep, Kesha opened her personal laptop and typed in a login that Victoria and Robert would never guess. Quash Dev, her GitHub account showed contributions to some of the world's most respected open-source projects, including some systems that Technova itself used. Her programming forums revealed years of elegant solutions to complex problems, all signed with her pseudonym. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Over years of observing the company's routines through her mother's accounts, Kesha had developed a deep understanding not only of Technova's technical systems, but also of its political and structural vulnerabilities. Every humiliation from Victoria, every condescending comment from Robert, every look of disdain from the other executives was being carefully cataloged, not out of revenge, but because Kesha had learned a valuable lesson early on. Knowledge is power, and patience is strategy. As she typed Linux code with surgical precision, her eyes shone with a determination her fellow executives would never suspect existed. They thought they knew Kesha Washington, the lucky daughter of a cleaning lady. What they didn't know was that they were about to discover that some people don't just survive prejudice. They become stronger and more dangerous with every attempt at humiliation. In the 2 weeks following her enlightening conversation with Victoria Sterling, Kesha's life at Technova became a meticulous exercise in observation and documentation. Every condescending interaction, every veiled comment, every look of disdain was carefully recorded in her memory. But Victoria and Robert had made a fundamental mistake. They assumed the humiliation was enough to silence a Somi who had survived a decade of systematic prejudice. On a rainy Tuesday morning, while organizing technical files in Victoria's office, Kesha noticed something interesting. A folder left open contained correspondence between Victoria and the consulting firm Hartwell and Associates, detailing a human resources optimization project that, translated from corporate jargon, meant mass layoffs for the technology parent. The timing was revealing that shortly after she had saved the billion-dollar system, Victoria was planning to cut costs by firing the very engineers who had failed to fix that problem. Even more interesting was the fact that Victoria was receiving a substantial commission for each approved layoff, a conflict of interest that directly violated the company's ethical policies. Kesha discreetly photographed documents with her cell phone, a skill she had honed over years of helping her mother document lab irregularities at previous jobs. 2 days later, during lunch, Kesha received a message that would completely change a game. On her GitHub profile, where Esh operated as Quashdev, a connection request arrived from a user named Technova Insider. I know who you are in real life. The message read, and I know they are criminally underestimating you. Can we talk? Initially suspicious, Kesha almost ignored the message. But something about the way it was written, technical and direct, made her hesitate. After a few careful exchanges, she discovered she was talking to Dr. Alex Chun, the son of lead developer David Chun, the same person who had confirmed her fix on the day of the incident. Alex was a senior software engineer at Technova itself, but worked remotely from the Portland office. I've been following your work online for 2 years, Alex confessed during an encrypted conversation. Your solutions for distributed systems are some of the most elegant I've ever seen. When my father told me about what happened at the meeting, I knew immediately that Quashdev and Kesha Washington were ani in the same. Alex revealed something that made Kesha's blood boil. Victoria had publicly taken credit for discovering the bug. That saved the system, claiming in executive meetings that she had guided a junior employee to find the problem. The official story recorded in company documents said that Victoria Sterling had personally led their resolution of the crisis. She's planning to use this to get promoted to Global Vice President of Technology. Alex mentioned, the final presentation is in 3 weeks and she's going to use her solution as the main case study. At that moment, Kesha understood that she was facing something much bigger than individual prejudice. It was an entire system designed to extract value from people like her while keeping them invisible. Victoria hadn't just stolen her credit. She was building an entire career on that appropriation, but Alex had more information. There are rumors that she's manipulating the performance evaluation algorithms to justify layoffs. If I'm right, she's violating at least 6 federal regulations on fair labor practices. Kesha was silent for a moment, processing the magnitude of what she had discovered. Then, for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Not a smile of resignation or forced politeness, but something predatory and calculated. Alex, she typed. Do you have access to performance review system logs? Not directly, but I know someone who does. Why? Because it's going to be necessary for what I have in mind. Over the next few days, Kesha began operating on 2 distinct levels. Publicly, she maintained her role as the humble and grateful daughter of a cleaning lady, greeting Victoria with polite smiles and accepting without protest when she was kindly discouraged from attending technical meetings. But privately, with Alex's help, she was building a dossier that would make the Watergate investigation look like a school project. Alex connected her with Dr. Prier, a forensic data analysis expert who worked remotely for Technova from Boston. Priya was outraged when she heard about the situation. You mean they stole your solution and now they're using it to justify layoffs? That's disgusting, Priya said during an encrypted video call. I have access to the metadata in the system. I can prove exactly when and by whom every line of code was modified. The trio set to work systematically. Alex provided inside access. Priya analyzed the technical data and coordinated everything while continuing her normal daily routine. What they discovered was even worse than they had expected. Victoria hadn't just stolen Kesha's credit. She had been systematically triggering solutions from several junior developers to herself over the past 2 years. More than a dozen important technical innovations had been developed by Victoria Sterling when in reality she could barely tell HTML from CSS. Worse still, the evaluation algorithms had been deliberately maintained to underestimate the performance of Black and Latino employees while artificially inflating the results of white executives like herself. The evidence was irrefutable. Statistical correlations, digital audit trails, and even audio recordings off meetings where Victoria openly discussed how to manage diversity without compromising standards. Robert Hayes was also in on it up to his neck. As CFO, He had approved multiple bonuses for Victoria based on innovations she had stolen while simultaneously cutting training budgets for minority employees. They created a whole scheme, Priya concluded, after analyzing terabytes of data. Systemic intellectual theft disguised as meritocracy. As Victoria's presentation date drew closer, Kesha finalized her preparations. She had documented screenshots of code with timestamps, audio recordings of discriminatory conversations, statistical analyses proving algorithmic minutiae, and even evidence that Victoria had violated federal civil rights laws. Alex had secured something even more valuable: access to the agenda for the executive presentation, where Victoria would receive her promotion. It's a video conference with all FE global VPs, he reported. Live streamed to every office in the company. Over 2,000 employees will be watching. Perfect. Kesha replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she finished her preparation. 2,000 witnesses will be more than enough. That evening, while helping her mother with physical therapy, Dolores noticed that something had changed in her daughter's demeanor. You seem different, sweetheart, more confident. Kesha smiled, kissing her mother's forehead. Just remembering something you always taught me, Mom. That dignity isn't something others can take away from you. It's something you choose to keep no matter what they try to do. And what are you planning to do with that dignity? Dolores asked, knowing her daughter too well not to realize something was afoot. I'm going to remind a few people that underestimating someone can be the most expensive mistake of their lives. Kesha replied, her eyes shining with a determination her mother hadn't seen in years. In fact, as Kesha finalized the last details of her strategy, she realized that Victoria and Robert had given her the perfect gift: time to prepare, abundant evidence to collect, and a public platform where the entire company would witness her response. They had assumed she was just a scared little girl who would accept any humiliation insolence. What they didn't know was that some people don't just survive prejudice. They study every pattern, every tactic, every vulnerability of their oppressors, until they come prepared for a war the enemy didn't even know they were fighting. And the more arrogant they became, the more evidence they left behind, meticulously constructing the very instrument of their professional destruction. On the morning of the presentation that would change everything, Kesha woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, not out of nervousness, but out of anticipation. After years of being underestimated, the time had finally come to show the true price of institutionalized arrogance. The large auditorium at Technova was packed. Executives from every continent and participate via video conference, while 2,000 employees watched in person as the presentation that would define the future of the company unfolded. Victoria Sterling walked across the stage with confidence of someone about to receive the biggest promotion of her career. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria began, her voice echoing through the sound system. Today, I'm going to share how our strategic leadership saved $1 billion investment that was on the verge of total collapse. In the back row, Kesha watched silently, her laptop connected to the company's internal network via credentials Alex had provided. At her side, her mother Dolores, who had asked for a special day off to see something important my daughter has prepared, held her hand proudly. The problem was extremely complex. Victoria continued, clicking to the next screen. Our best engineers worked tirelessly, but it was my expertise in systems architecture that identified the critical flaw. James Mitchell, CEO, nodded approvingly from front row. The international board members smiled on the screens, clearly impressed by Victoria's narrative. Then the lights in the auditorium dimmed and a new voice cut through the silence, calm, clear, and devastatingly content. "Excuse me, Miss Sterling," Kesha said, rising from the back row, "but there are some important details about that story you forgot to mention." Victoria froze on stage, her microphone still on, picking up her heavy breathing. You shouldn't be here. This is an executive presentation." "You're right," Kesha replied, walking slowly down the center aisle. "But as the actual author of the solution you're representing, I believe I have the right to set the record straight." A murmur of confusion rippled through the auditorium. Mitchell frowned, clearly lost. "What is she talking about, Victoria?" Kesha reached the stage and, without asking permission, connected her laptop to the projection system. "My name is Kesha Washington, also known online as Quash Dev, and I can prove fate every line of code Miss Sterling is presenting as hers was written by me." The giant screen behind Victoria now displayed Kesha's GitHub with thousands of contributions and an impeccable reputation in the international developer community. Audible gasps echoed through the auditorium. "That's impossible," Victoria stammered, her face draining of color. "She's just shadows and have the qualifications." "You're right about one thing," Kesha interrupted, her voice carrying years often of dignity. "I don't have a collegiate degree, but I have something you clearly didn't: integrity." Kesha clicked to the next screen. Detailed timestamps showed exactly when each correction had been made to Technova system, correlating graphically with the commits on Quash Dev ithub. "But stealing my work was just beginning," Kesha continued, her presentation flowing with the precision of a seasoned prosecutor. "Dr. Pryania, our forensic expert, discovered something far more sinister." The screeno showed devastating statistical graphs, correlations between race and performance reviews, irrefutable evidence of algorithmic manipulation, internal emails discussing how to manage a diversity without compromising standards. Robert Hayes, sitting in Thuskin Row, was visibly sweating. That as taken out of context, was it?" Kesha smiled, clicking to play a crystal clearer audio recording. Victoria's voice echoed through the auditorium. "We need to be smart about this, Robert. We can't just fire Black and Latino employees outright. But if the algorithms show that they don't meet standards," the silence in the auditorium was deathly. On the video conference screens, international assistants exchanged shocked glances. Mitchell was as pale as a sheet. "This is a hoax," Victoria shouted, finally finding her voice. "She's lying. Fabricating evidence. Really?" Kesha remained serene. Then, "Can you explain why you received commissions of $200,000 for every dismissal approved through Hartwell and Associates, a company that incidentally is owned by your brother-in-law?" The screen now showed contracts, bank transfers, and of corruption. Stretching back 2 years, Victoria Sterling wasn't just stealing credit. She was monetizing systemic discrimination. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kesha said, addressing the cameras directly, "for 2 years, this company has been infected by a cancer. Not just intellectual theft, but institutionalized discrimination. This as meritocracy. Alex Chun, connected from Portland, appeared on one of the screens. "I can't confirm every bite of this evidence. As a senior engineer with access to these systems, I personally witnessed the manipulation of the data." Victoria looked desperately at Mitchell, at the board members, at any ally. But the faces around her revealed only horror and disgust. Her 15-year career was crumbling in real time, broadcast live to thousands of people. "James," she pleaded, using the CEO's first name for the first time in years. "You know me. We worked together for I thought I did," Mitchell replied, his voice cold as ice. "But the person I knew wouldn't steal work from a brilliant young woman and then try to destroy her career." Kesha approached the microphone one last time. "I didn't do this out of revenge. I did it because I believe companies like Technova can be better. They can be places where talent is recognized regardless of last name, degree, or skin color. As the auditorium erupted in applause, Victoria Sterling stood alone on stage, her hands shaking uncontrollably. In 15 minutes, she had lost her career, her reputation, and any chance of ever working in Silicon Valley again. Robert Hayes was already being escorted out by security, his phone ringing incessantly, probably lawyers trying to damage control. Meanwhile, Kesha stepped off the stage with the same calm she had stepped on it with. Her mother waited for her with tears right in her eyes. And for the first time in years, Kesha felt like the world was finally seeing who she really was. But the real question remained. In a company that had been built on privilege and prejudice, was it possible to build something genuinely new? And how would Kesha use her devastating victory to create change that would last far beyond that moment of public justice? 6 months after the presentation that destroyed careers and reshaped an entire company, Kesha Washington sat in her new office as Director of Innovation and Technology Ethics at Technova. The panoramic view that once seemed unattainable was now part of her daily routine. Victoria Sterling had discovered that a destroyed reputation in technology spreads like a virus quickly and impossibly hard to delete. After federal investigations confirmed civil rights violations, she faced not only the end of her career, but criminal charges. Her last attempt at employment was rejected by a startup that ironically used open source code developed by Kesha. Robert Hayes' fate was even more poetic. The illegal commissions resulted in fines that consumed his savings and his Malibu home. Now, working as an accountant at Asmol firm, his ambitions of empire were reduced to small business spreadsheets. James Mitchell had become a complete eluded CEO. Kesha taught me facial talent doesn't need pedigree. It just needs opportunity, he said during a conference on ethical leadership. The transformation at Technova was radical. The new evaluation algorithm supervised by Kesha eliminated systematic biases. Productivity increased by 40%, proving that diversity wasn't just morally right. It was economically smart. Dolores Washington, now with access to the best medical care, watched her daughter's achievements with pride. He always knew she was special, but seeing her turn injustice into strength to help others, that makes me even prouder. A lecture at MIT, the university she couldn't attend years earlier, a student asked how she had remained calm in the face of such humiliation. Because I learned that anger only burns those who carry it, Kesha smiled. Intelligence, patience, and preparation are much more efficient fuels for real change. Kesha founded the Code for All initiative, offering scholarships and mentoring to young people from marginalized communities. The program has already trained hundreds of developers working at leading Silicon Valley companies. The best revenge, she used to say, is not to destroy those who hurt you. It's to build something so great that the limitations they tried to impose on you become meaningless. Victoria, watching the news about Kesha's global success from her rented apartment, finally understood the magnitude of her arrogance. She had underestimated a force of nature disguised as humility. Kesha's story proved that some people don't just serve of prejudice, they turn it into fuel for achievements that redefine what's possible. While Victoria faced the consequences of years of discrimination, Kesha was building bridges to a future where talent would be recognized regardless of origin. That cleaning lady's daughter had become the architect of a new technological parag, proving the true revolution happens when intelligence meets opportunity, and that underestimating some can be the most costly mistake of a lifetime. If this story of overcoming adversity touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories that prove that what other street to use to bring us down becomes exactly the strength we need to rise above all expectations.